Really want to start it.
Welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Join us every Wednesday to learn about the latest cutting-edge developments in the real-time communications industry. ClueCon Weekly is brought to you by FreeSwitch Solutions. Get support and professional services directly from the creators of the FreeSwitch open source project, solving your issues in the most efficient, stable, and scalable way possible. Get the FreeSwitch advantage. Visit freeswitch.com. Also brought to you by ClueCon, the premier technology conference for developers by developers. Join us every summer in Chicago. ClueCon kicks off on Monday with our annual hackathon, The Coder Games, followed by 3 days of technology-rich presentations discussing telecom, WebRTC, and IoT from developers around the world. To learn more, visit ClueCon.com or call 877-74-CLUE.
And welcome to ClueCon Weekly, guys. It's December the 5th. We're moving into the holiday season here in the States and around the rest of the world. And so we're going to have a whole bunch of fun this week. This week we've got Erik Lagerway from SignalWire. For you guys that don't know Erik, he's a heavy contributor to ORTC. He's been around the market forever and a day. It seems like. I think Erik goes all the way back to some of the earliest days at Counterpath. And everybody knows who those guys are. So he's going to be talking about SignalWire today and how you can integrate that with some of your projects and a brief introduction to it. So you guys stand by for that. Let's go over and see Miss Abby for the news. Abby, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thank you for asking. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today on ClueCon Weekly. We are very appreciative of the FreeSwitch community, as you already know, and it is the season. So we are offering $50 in credit for all new SignalWire registrations. Like every week, this is last week, we'll be putting the link in the comments to sign up for your very own SignalWire space if you have not done that already, with the code FreeSwitch31337 to get that $50 off in SignalWire credit. Let us know what you're working on. We're really interested to hear about what you think, so let us know in our community channels. Which brings us into our next news. If you haven't heard, we are now on Slack. We're very excited about it. You can always contact us through traditional methods like the mailing list and through IRC. But if you are interested in joining the FreeSwitch community Slack channel or the SignalWire community Slack channel, you can find a link for that on our Facebook page, on our website, or in the chat box below where I will put it briefly. Of course, as always, if you have any questions during this call about anything at all, please comment them in the YouTube, HipChat, or IRC channels, our new Slack channels, and we will definitely answer them live during this call. So our next news is that our next FreeSwitch training is coming up pretty soon. That is a virtual training meant for beginners. It's definitely a very intense training. It's about 8 hours long. And our next one is taking place on Thursday, December 13th. So if you're interested in an in-depth beginner level training, you can find more information about that on our website underneath our products page. And my favorite news of all, ClueCon is coming up quicker than you think. So this year we are back on August 5th through 8th. So make sure you save that date in your calendars. We really want to see you this year because it is our 15th anniversary and we are planning a lot of fun surprises. So you definitely don't want to miss out. One of the fun things we're doing, of course, is the Voicetail Sunset Boat Tour that has become a staple of our conference. It's very popular. That always happens on the Thursday of ClueCon. So if you're thinking about maybe staying for a little bit of the week, I would definitely suggest staying until Thursday because that is a beautiful event. And of course, if you're interested in sponsoring any other events that ClueCon holds, we have a lot of different parties, networking events, opportunities. Email Sharon at freeswitch.com and she can give you more information about that. All right, see you guys in a little bit. Back to you, Ken.
All right. Thank you very much, Miss Abby. So now, guys, we're going to go over and talk to Mr. Michael Malbrutis. Mike, think you've got a new Community Corner question for us?
We do. Yes. And so that question is for Mike Jarris. The question was posted to the Free Switch mailers users mailing list, and it was from Tiago. Tiago asks, "Hello, friends. I would like to know how is the better way to block outbound calls with early media and SIP trunks. I have a system for call center, and I have a big problem with calls in voicemail entering to agents. I've tried to use monitor early media fail and ignore early media, but it didn't have a successful result. Is it possible to use this function to block it? How can I do it?" So, Mike, it's not really an early media question, right?
Well, that's the first thing I was going to go to. Calls having early media have absolutely nothing at all to do with whether they're voicemail or not. In fact, 99.9% of the time, their voicemail will have absolutely nothing at all to do with early media. It's all after the answer. There are a few methodologies for detecting if something is a machine or a person. The two main ones are you detect the beep at the end of a machine message. And the other one is you use some sort of heuristic analysis of the way that the phone is answered in the speech after that to try to determine if it's a person or a machine. For example, if I'm going to answer the phone as a person, I'm going to answer, "Hello, Michael Jarris," or something like that. But if I'm a machine, I'm going to say, "Hi, you've reached Michael Jarris. I'm not here right now, but if you can leave me a message, I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as possible." So patterns based on how many words are said,
You're talking about like waveform patterns and stuff like that.
You're actually looking at, yes, there's different approaches and different approaches for figuring out what's speech and what's not. But essentially, most of these approaches look at how much speech is happening after the answer, because a normal person answering the phone doesn't have a long diatribe speech that they're giving you, but an answer machine often does. So
so what's the traditional way? Right.
So most things out there that do this use some sort of waveform analysis that actually looks at the speech and the length of the speech and things like that to understand if it's a person or a machine. And that's what Modcom AMD, which is the answer machine detection module that we sell, that's what that does. The only gotcha with that is there's some weird things out there that you don't catch right with that. Our detectors in the 90-some% accuracy, 90, 95, somewhere in there. But the beep detection does help fill out the rest. So there is another module in FreeSwitch. It's in the open source called Mod AVMD. And that's a generic beep detector, which is a surprisingly difficult thing to do. Tone detection is easy, but getting a tone of unknown frequency and detecting that there is a tone is actually kind of an interesting DSP problem. And
so basically every voicemail system could have a different tone.
Sure, and even callee to callee. There's standards in everything in telephony, but there is no standard for what the tone for a beep for a voicemail is. How they managed to miss that, I mean, their standards are different in every country and all that, but no one ever said we should standardize this. It's just, every random manufacturer and, every random place, makes a tone thing, and there's, it's whatever it is. So we have these two things. We have a paid module that does 90-some%. We have this free module, which can catch some of the other things. Those are the metrics. Now, in relation to early,
it's best to actually, if you want to get the highest level of success, it's best to use both, right?
Yeah, I think you should use both. And the question originally was about early media, and I said, this has nothing to do with voicemail. That isn't entirely true. There are voicemail systems out there that will start to play back the greeting, the initial 10 seconds or so of it in early media. There's not many of them. They're trying to, get around, charges for the calls, and so they're answering later. So they do exist. There's not very many of them. As it happens, the methods we're using for answering machine detection, a little bit being cut off on the beginning isn't a big deal. So they'll mostly work, but also I believe our detector will work in early media as well. I think we changed that recently. So the big answer to the question is to detect answering machines, it has nothing at all to do with early media. You're going to want to check out ModCom AMD, which is available for purchase on our website. And the future hint on this one is we are on the SignalWire cloud product working on an implementation of answering machine detection that'll use a combination of these technologies built right into our cloud APIs. So you could use that for termination and for answering machine detection.
That's actually something that, it's a great product for a call center because it's something that's very frequently asked because they don't, especially with dialers and stuff like that, they don't want to end up in the voicemail.
Well, yeah, and it can potentially offload all of that processing off your systems, which does take a lot of CPU to do it. So if you want to terminate through us, you could use the answering machine detection and our termination. And only backhaul the calls that you actually want to speak to your location. So it's potentially a real nice product for call centers to make use of.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Answers from the experts.
No problem.
And now we back to Abby for BlogStop.
All right. Hi, everybody. So this week, I am going to start you off with a little quote from our good friend, Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs said that everyone in this country should learn to program a computer because it teaches you to think. So today we're going to be talking all about how thinking like a programmer can help you solve real life problems more efficiently. And I bet a lot of you programmers watching this live or later in the comments are probably thinking, yeah, that's definitely true. I already agree with that. But I know for a fact there are a few skeptics out there in the world. But yes, thinking like a programmer really could solve all of your problems. Okay, so it won't solve all of your problems, but it definitely will make life more efficient. The trick is that a programmer never solves their problems willy-nilly. They have a system, and you should too. So if you're anything like me, trial and error works eventually, but causes a lot of unnecessary pain and suffering. But if only there was an easier way. Oh, wait, there is. So the first thing a programmer does when introduced to a problem is to take time to make sure you really understand what the problem is. So you can't just assume you already know what the problem is after a quick glance. You have to mull it over until you can put what you're trying to solve into simple terms. As famed physicist Richard Feynman said, if you cannot explain something in simple terms, you don't understand it. So try explaining the problem to a friend or drawing out a diagram to make sure that you have a full grasp on what you are about to tackle. Next up is to plan your solution. Only Superman knows how to solve a problem without thinking it through. And as awesome as you probably are, you're definitely not Superman. So once you understand the problem, what are the steps that you need to take in order to reach a favorable output? And don't just plan out the solution in your head, write it down. Next step is to reduce your problem. Programmers know that you cannot solve a problem in one fell swoop. You have to break it down into pieces and then solve those sub-problems one at a time until you reach that goal. So reduce the problem into something you already know how to solve with very little effort. Then you can expand it ever so gradually until you're back to the problem you originally started with. Well, this technique works well with math and programming. It works well with your IRL problems too. Don't know whether or not to take a new job? Think back to a time when you solved a similar problem. How did that work out? What would have happened if you did blank differently? And work your way up from there. Next is debugging. Sometimes we don't solve problems on the first try. In fact, we almost never solve problems on the first try without at least a few mistakes. So in coding, we could just go back through our solution step by step until we find our mistakes and we can fix them. But in life, we don't have the luxury of going back in time to change our outcome. However, we can retrace our steps to find where we went wrong, take note of it, learn from it, and use that knowledge to remedy mistakes and avoid them in the future. Another trick programmers use is when they are stuck on a problem, look at it with a fresh perspective. Forget about all of the bias you worked up so far and start at the beginning again. Is there a way to simplify your problem more than you thought? And of course, I'm sure you're all thinking it, Google. Isn't it great living in the 21st century? Most problems we encounter have already been solved by other people, and they're already posted on the internet. Hooray for us, we can just use their help. This is all very important skills, especially in life, but especially in our job life. Many studies and interviews cite that employers are always looking for team members with strong problem-solving skills. HackerRank reported that 94.2% of IT employers look for problem-solving first, while only 55.2% prioritize programming efficiency. Of course, most programmers already have these skills nailed down. The rest of us just have to catch up. All right, thank you guys for listening. I'll see you all next week.
All right, guys, and we're going to jump over to back over to Mike Mavroudis, and I think he's got somebody for us to talk to today with Erik.
Yes, so today we have Erik Lagerway, and Erik Lagerway has done some really impressive things. And no eye roll. So you've been on some consortiums, you've written some really cool software apps, and now you're working with SignalWire. So why don't you tell us, first of all, tell us about your history.
Oh yeah, the meaning of life.
How did you get involved in telecom and all that stuff? And
yeah, cool. Yeah, it's I could go 20 feet down the rabbit hole, I guess, but I'll try and keep it high level for you. So, back in 1997, I built a little company that was creating H323 voice apps with dialogic cards and some janky Windows software and janky Windows OSs that wouldn't stay running for more than 15 minutes. We had to create scripts to reboot the servers to keep it going, and funded that by way of an ad in an immigrant bulletin. Basically, there was a bulletin that went out to immigrants that were looking to immigrate to Canada, and there was two ways to get into the country. You could invest in a local company and become part of that company and help it grow, or you could stand in line with everybody else. So there was a bulletin that went out to these people that were looking to come into Canada, and I put a little ad in the bulletin that basically said, make telephone calls over the internet for free. Yes, it's real. Call me, I will show you. And I had a few phone calls, and one guy calls me and he says, Erik, is this real? And I said, yes, it's real. And he said, whereabouts in Vancouver are you? I says, well, I live in Burnaby. Okay, I can be there in 20 minutes. Can you give me your address?
I love the story.
Yeah, okay. So he shows up in a Porsche, of course, and I'm in a rented house, and with a couple of other bachelors. The place is a mess. The lawn's 3 feet high, and there's probably all sorts of rodents living in the on the property. And he comes to the door, and there's a little sign that says, Vocalscape this way. So he goes around to the back, and again, lawn this high, and he knocks on the door, and I come to the door, and he says, Erik. And I said, yes. He goes, Anton, show me. I'm like, okay, come on in. So he walks by my very large piles of laundry and over to my little desk in the corner of the basement. And I'd compiled this little application that was talking to, a dialogic server that was under my feet, basically. And I said, do you have a business card or something? And he goes, yeah, here. And he hands me his card. And he says, can you make it quick? I've got other stuff I have to, attend to. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I key in his phone number, and I say, okay, so you just basically hit this call button, and then it'll call it'll make a phone call. And he's like, yeah, sure. So he hits the button. His phone rings. He doesn't recognize the caller ID, and he says, I don't know. I don't recognize who this is. I'm going to step outside and take this call. I'll be right back. I'm like, okay. So
And it was you.
he steps outside and he goes, Anton speaking. And I said, Anton, it's Erik. I'm in the basement. And he came inside and he wrote me a check for $175,000, and that's how I funded my very first voice over IP startup. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I never knew that story.
Yeah. That's my fun story to tell. So that's kind of how it started. And from there, that company grew to about 30 people locally, and then the .bomb came along, and we were in the process of going public with a company on the local Vancouver Stock Exchange as part of that project.
That was Counterpath?
No, that was prior to Counterpath. It was called Vocalscape at the time, and Vocalscape was in the middle of we were being underwritten by a local brokerage to go public. And then the .bomb happened, and the underwriter went under. So Yorkton Securities was the name of the company, and it went under, and they took us with them. So that company got sold off for parts. And the next project that I did was X10, which became Counterpath, and that's how that journey kind of started. And did a whole bunch of fun stuff with Counterpath, and kind of helped drive the SIP vision, as it were, in the industry. And then when Counterpath, I was there for since inception as a co-founder for a few years, I think 3 or 4 years, and it was growing like wildfire. And I was
going to say there's got to be a ton of software installations.
Yeah, by the time I left, it was in the tens of millions. So that gives you some sense of how many endpoints are probably out there today. But I had a lot of fun doing that, and learned a ton. And soon after I left Counterpath to create my next startup, which was a conference service provider. That startup, we were struggling to find a platform to use to build that product. And I ended up talking to, Tony. And, Tony was very helpful, and I got introduced to Mr. Jarris and Mr. West. And pretty soon we were, I had a couple of engineers in my basement, and we were chugging away on FreeSwitch code and trying to build this really cool kind of futuristic conferencing platform, which got, huge accolades in the local rags and online magazines. And I sold that later for, what it was worth, and went on to build some other stuff with Hookflash, got involved in W3C with, the ORTC community group initially, and worked with Rob and Raymond to create a spec around, object-based communication versus SDP-centric communication. And our argument was, SDP was never meant for web communication. Let's not, force the issue. So web and mobile, really. And that led to me being asked to join the W3C's WebRTC working group, where we folded in a lot of that object, based methodology into the WebRTC spec. So did that for, a better part of a year, I guess, or just over a year. And as we were building my other startup, Hookflash, and, did a bunch of contract work inside that company, and did a lot of great things there, and went to work for Dialpad, driving their enterprise communications group, and took about a 6-month sabbatical to, lose a bunch of money on blockchain. And
that's another upcoming boom, right?
yeah. So I think it was a bit early.
Everything's got to have a blockchain.
Yeah, a bit down a little bit early on that one, but suffice it to say, learned a lot there as well, and had a lot of fun. And one thing led to another, and I was talking to Rob and Raymond again, and we were discussing some projects that were kind of in the midst, and SignalWire's name came up, and I reached out to Tony and said, "Hey, what's going on? I'm hearing good things about SignalWire." And one thing led to another, and here I am, and I'm really super excited about what we're building at SignalWire.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. Um, so I think the like we spent a couple of months in beta, fine tuning our go to market for our initial offering, and the initial offering was a really straightforward third party call control layer of APIs that allowed anyone that was currently using a competitive service to bring it over to SignalWire and make use of our platform in an immediate way and reduce that pain at great discounts. So one of the philosophies inside the company is to pass along the savings that we can provide with our carrier relationships directly to the guys that are building the applications and the companies that are building these applications with those developers. So having a great way to onboard existing users and existing companies and enterprises that are using those products is paramount to that strategy. So that was kind of, checkbox number one. And the second part of that story is, how are we going to make this better than what you have? Giving you a discount and providing you with the same services is not really a super long-term compelling argument for, a lot of heavy lifting. So the second part of that conversation is our real-time APIs that are coming down the pipe as I speak are what gets me really excited about the future of SignalWire. So REST APIs have been around for a long time. They create inherent delays when you're coding real-time communications applications. And the architecture that's been created by Evan and the engineering team within SignalWire goes way past, this kind of WebSocket concept and into the real-time development realm. And I find that
Because when you're dealing with real-time call control, it's beyond shoving something into a database, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then sending a request and waiting for a response, and that's kind of like last decade's method of thinking. So that kind of change in philosophy within the development and architecture of these various of this platform that we're building is fundamental to, I think, the long-term success of the company. And real-time event monitoring, real-time billing event monitoring, and actions on those events, I think, are it's going to be one of the things that sets this company apart from the rest of the competition. So that's got me really excited. And in terms of what we've done recently, so we were in GA, or we were in beta for a couple of months. We went GA not long ago, 6 weeks ago, and it was pretty exciting to see all that vision actually be realized. And now that we're coming into the end of the quarter, we're going to see a lot of really exciting stuff start coming out. And there's been constant releases. SIP connectivity and basic SIP trunking functionality was introduced, a few weeks back. Verified caller ID came out last week, which is basically, if you want to use your existing landline caller ID, you can now do that within the SignalWire system. And those documents are up on the SignalWire community Slack channel, which everybody should probably know by now. But if you don't know, it's the SignalWire community is basically signalwire.community. It's pretty straightforward. So you can find some help there if you're looking to build some stuff. But I'll quit barfing all over the microphone here and hand off to someone else. But if you want to hear more about what's coming down the pipe past what I've already described, I'm happy to get into the details.
So what do you really like about RTC? So you've had a lot of experience in it, and you've been on some of the good working consortiums. What gets you excited about it?
Well, I think it's the same thing that got me excited about it when I was 8 years old. My dad was a ham radio operator, and I used to sit on his lap, and we used to talk over ham radio to people in Russia and people, on the other side of the planet. And
There's a lot of people that used ham radio that actually work in VoIP now. It's staggering. Like I talk to
yeah,
people all the time that have done it.
yeah. And the mentality is very similar, right? It's like, using radio waves at near zero cost. There's a membership fee to be part of the amateur radio associations, but to be able to use those radio waves to communicate over really long distances is very compelling. And that's kind of what drove me, I think later in life towards that kind of same, that same method of communication. It's like, okay, well, my dad was a ham radio operator, but he was also one of the first people in Western Canada to have a kit computer. He had this computer called an IMSI 8080, which was a hexadecimally programmed computer. And together we would sit there and, he'd be talking to guys on ham radio that also have these computers and, sharing ideas on, how to best program, a teletype application for this IMSI 8080. And I was sitting there with flip switches, just, doing what I was told. So it was this really kind of immersive communication / technology, background and source of input from my dad that I think has got me really excited about it. And to this day, I'm super excited about the fact that we can use IP to do a lot of really cool stuff. And now with artificial intelligence getting involved and automation of a lot of the mundane tasks, I'll call it. I think that is kind of like the next level of excitement. And then adding IoT on top of that, it even gets more interesting. So I think it's pretty exciting to see what SignalWire and the Free Switch community are building together to really kind of firepower a lot of the coolest ways to communicate on the planet. It's really cool.
So what do you foresee with AI?
Well, I mean,
Is it going to be the end of the human race?
if you ask Elon Musk, I guess we got to all take cover, right? No, I don't think it's going to be the end of the human race. I think it's going to, much like cloning, was a big to do, a decade ago. I think that, it's the same kind of, it's the same situation. I believe we'll be kept in check by our own willingness to survive. So we're not going to allow things to get away from us. And I think the Skynet philosophy is, a little bit more conspiracy theory than people would like to admit. I'm just grateful that we're able to, connect SignalWire to Dialogflow and have, those agents that are created within Dialogflow use the SignalWire resources, the telephony trunks and the messaging trunks that are coming to support that kind of technology. I think that's super valuable for a lot of companies in that, IVRs are so overdone and they are the bane to most people's, lives when communicating with large companies. So to be able to inject new life into that paradigm, I think is super important. And I'm really glad that we've kind of included it in our roadmap looking forward as well.
Yeah, I got to tell you, sometimes as an end user calling, especially when you call credit card companies and stuff like that, I mean, they ask you for your credit card number like 4 different times. It's like,
well, or they ask you to verify who you are, 3 different times in the same call, right? It's like, I just went through this. You've just multiplied the amount of time.
Phone companies, same thing, same exact thing.
So the sooner we can get to a place where, a lot of this stuff is automated and is just done naturally by way of AI and integration with, intelligent agents that can help with text to speech and injecting, speech recognition and in concert with the actual intelligent agents themselves, I think will really add a lot of value to a lot of enterprises out there building, futuristic applications.
So when you talk about conspiracy theories with AI, I actually had a really funny experience.
Nice.
Um, there was a ton of traffic. And I'm getting onto the George Washington Bridge, right? And there's a police barrier, and I'm like, I could cut off at least 30 minutes if I just drive around the police barrier really quick and pull through. And I'm like, and they'll never catch me. And then the next thing you know, there was like four police cars. And they come up, and I look at the police officer and I go, but Google told me to do it. he's he's floored. He's absolutely floored.
Google
And
told me to do it.
so yeah.
That's awesome. That is absolutely awesome.
So he goes back, writes me up the ticket, and comes back, and he goes, "Did you ever see the movie The Terminator?" And I was like, "No." I was, I was,
Please
I was like,
enlighten
"Why?"
me.
Yeah, and he goes, "Well, they had this thing called Skynet," and I'm like, that analogy. I'm thinking to myself, I was like, "All right, I'll watch the movie." That analogy doesn't even apply. Like, it doesn't even really apply. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I take my ticket and I go, and you know what? I still save time because the traffic was that bad.
And you got some entertainment, out of it as well.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think AI is really going to change the face of telecom. And finding
Yeah.
really good applications for it, is kind of some of the challenging ways. And so, but just doing analysis of call flows and stuff like
Mhm.
that, like talking about like the AVMD stuff, like you start applying AI to AVMD stuff, and like, you get above that 98% chance substantially.
Yeah, sentiment analysis is big. I think that's going to certainly play a part. We're seeing that already in the industry, and you're seeing some movement there. But from what I'm seeing so far in terms of the integration with Dialogflow from a SignalWire perspective, there's a lot of really interesting applications for the technology. The technology is way ahead of where the industry is at right now. The technology which is where it should be, right? Like, we should be in that kind of situation where we're able to take advantage of some of the stuff before the need or the enterprise, applications arrive. So it's a good situation to be in, but there's a lot of education that's required in order to have people understand what they can do. Here's an example of how you can use SignalWire technology and Google AI technology together to do some things to really eradicate a lot of the, stagnant air that you have in your public facing IVRs and your public facing materials and assets. And so I think they have to get comfortable with it, and that's going to take a little while. But it's good that we have the technology ahead of the requests that are coming from the customers, and they are coming, but they're not at the level that I was expecting, which is interesting.
So, explain to the audience exactly what Dialogflow is. Because I've got, I've got a really good real-time implementation. And it's not my idea. It's actually, Google's, and it's in the Pixel 3, and and that's really cool. And I'll explain that in a second. But so, what is
cool.
Dialogflow?
Well, Dialogflow is basically a framework for building artificial intelligent agents. And these agents are trained with some basic machine learning, but they also have, you can also, ingest knowledge bases into these agents, and they will actually machine learn a little bit between the different phrases. And if you publish this, you can publish it to Google Home, which actually will create an application, and you can use it with Google Home devices. If you tie it into the SignalWire backbone in our service, which is a really easy to do process, you just log into the SignalWire dashboard and import agent as an adjunct. But the idea here is that you can use Google Home, you can use messaging by way of SMS, you can also use telephony, and you can use the same agent for all three of those. So build it once, deploy it everywhere. And the interesting thing about that is you can do it in multiple facets. So if there's some certain code that you've written to work as an agent in some other fashion, you can also, tweak that and integrate that by way of fulfillment within Dialogflow. So really, it's just like an easier to understand framework for creating artificial intelligent agents that can be deployed, in primarily those three ways, like within the Google Home device, category, and the messaging and telephony category.
So one of the best real-time call control examples I've seen is actually embedded in the Pixel, right? Or the Pixel 3. And so,
Okay.
and they're going to be rolling it out to the Pixel 2 incrementally over the next software update. But basically what they do is, you have answer reject, right? The call's coming in. So now we have, I think it's called screen, I'm not even sure. Call comes in, you hit screen. And so early media goes, hello, can you please identify yourself? The receiver of the call can see your messaging.
Oh, cool.
Right?
So
then
it's a combination
you
of,
see it. Yeah,
yeah.
you see what they're saying transcribed in the screen, and you can either answer or reject it.
Yeah, cool. I mean, that's been around for quite a while, but to have it transcribed in real time and then fed to the callee is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's a really interesting, that's a really interesting example of how some of that technology can be used in a real way to affect consumers, globally. That's really cool.
Yeah, and you got to think about it like with the distribution of the Pixel 3 and then pushing it out to the Pixel 2. I mean, there's some real scalability there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you got to think about like you're talking about a real substantial call flows and producing this effectively across large call flows like that.
Yeah,
That's a challenge in its own right.
exactly. And I think that like an application like that, it's great that Google is doing this within their own kind of, device families. But, with Google AI or with, Alexa or, pick your AI platform, you can start doing this across, it becomes device agnostic, because if you're using our backbone, our SignalWire, platform, you can be doing this with messaging and telephony across the board. You don't have to be using a Pixel. So I think that.
Well, yeah, and so the real the real implementation is like this is something that businesses would really kind of want to like all of a sudden, while someone's on an IVR, understanding what's being said in the background before the agent answers the phone, or collecting the actual social security number from the customer. So it pops up into Salesforce and that person's information is pre-populated by the time you get there. I mean, there's some real cool applications that can be,
there certainly is, and there certainly is, and there's a lot of capability there. I'll just say it again that, the enterprises don't move that fast. Google can move that fast. They have ownership of the entire stack and the device. Apple doesn't even move that fast, as we've seen. So to have enterprise companies, that have, large budgets and slow rolling innovation, it just doesn't happen that quickly. That being said, they can do it, and then we're here. We're here to support them in building the coolest, most progressive applications that will solve all of their problems internally. We can solve all the world's problems, so come and talk to us. We'll help you. But I just knowing how these larger companies work, they're still trying to figure out how to deploy voicemail, right? Like you kind of have to reset your expectations. Having the technology is really cool. Applying it to a use case that a customer has is another story. Showing them the future and what they can do is our job, right? Like we can do all that, but let's think about solving the problem in a different way so that you can tick more boxes and get more ROI. That's our job, and that's what I spend all day doing with some of our prospect customers, and it's a ball, it's a blast.
All right. Well, do you have anything else?
No, nothing much. Just apart from we have a new release of we have some new features coming out for SignalWire. I would say in the next week or so, depending on how things go. It's called connectors, and connectors provide a remote resource with direct connectivity to SignalWire, and we kind of already deployed SIP connectivity for basically any SIP endpoint, but connectors are specific to specific resources. So the first connector that we're building is called the FreeSwitch connector, and that connector will be will see the light of day shortly. Like I said, I'm expecting it within the next week or so, and that will provide a module for FreeSwitch admins where they can install this module, and it'll just appear inside their SignalWire project.
That's cool.
Yeah, so and soon you're going to see these modules get deployed with the FreeSwitch open source code, so that they don't have to install anything. They just have to grab
put in your account code.
Just put in your code that is presented to you in the console in FreeSwitch inside the SignalWire connector, and bang, it's live. And now you can start attributing all of those resources that you've been looking to acquire, like your phone numbers and everything else. And so that's the first connector that we'll be coming out with shortly, and then that'll be followed by other connectors as well. We're going to bolster some stuff on AI, and we already have dialogue flow integration for voice. It's pretty robust already. But there's going to be some additional features that we're going to be integrating with. Messaging is still to follow on the dialogue flow side, so we'll be finishing that off shortly. And then there's the WebRTC stuff, which is kind of near and dear to my heart. And so all those web JavaScript libs and mobile SDKs in relation to WebRTC, voice and video will be coming. And then 2019 is just like chock-a-blocked full of super exciting stuff that gets me out of bed every morning now. So I'm super pumped. Yeah, it's really fun.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming in today. And we hope to hear about new innovation coming, from the SignalWire product line.
Absolutely,
So
I'm happy to come back
and hopefully see you real soon.
Yeah, absolutely. As we start dropping some of these stuff, I'll make sure to connect with everybody here, and we'll get them the live deets as they happen. You heard it first here.
Back to you, Ken.
All right. Thank you very much, Erik and Michael, for joining us today. You guys keep an eye out for what Erik's working on, because I'm sure he'll have a lot more stuff for us in the future from SignalWire and from just in general, because he's a smart guy. So thanks again, Erik. Thanks again, Mr. Mavridis. And
Thanks, guys.
Here. All right, guys. Don't forget, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and for you guys watching us on YouTube, click that subscribe button down below, and you'll get, and then click the little notification icon, and you'll get notifications the next time we go live, or the next time we post videos, so you can see what's going on in the FreeSwitch community. There'll be more information from SignalWire coming out, I am sure on that, and you'll also see topics for a variety of other things. So if you have suggestions for somebody you'd like to see here on ClueCon Weekly, please let us know, and we'll do the legwork to get them in here. Just give us some ideas on that, and because we want to get people in here that you want to see. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next week.
You've been watching ClueCon Weekly. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central. Keep up with the latest happenings by subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or visit us at freeswitch.com.